Sondre, welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I've got so many questions for you. I've been doing my research, listening to you on some other podcasts as well. You're originally from Norway, yeah? Can you walk us through? Not originally, I guess you can only be from one place, so
Right.
still from Norway. But can you walk us through, growing up there and lead us up into kind of what led you into being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am indeed from Norway, I live in San Francisco now. Was interested in entrepreneurship really early. So when I was 12, 13, I started um, sort of web hosting business kind of, obviously like a little bit like the lemonade stand version of web hosting, but it wasn't a total lemonade stand. Like we had real customers paying us money to host their websites. Um, and that was a great learning experience.
Was this
I
like early 2000s or what?
I was actually like we started in 1999.
Okay.
Uh, yeah,
Okay, cool.
1999. So it was a really interesting learning experience, and I learned, some things that was incredibly useful for later. Like for example, that if you don't have a differentiated product, you end up just bidding down the price, which is an insight, Peter Thiel later expanded upon, but it was good to get that learning early. Um, yeah, so grow up, then have some other entrepreneurial efforts, but got interested also in politics, and decided to switch from the more kind of computer science track to studying economics. And I was elected to the city council in my hometown of Bergen, and that was also my first job out of college was policy advisor for the government of Norway.
Do you mind me asking, like, what do your parents do for a living, or what did they do?
My dad has a company, boats, and my mom is like a lawyer, but she works in like fisheries management, like making sure you don't overfish.
Okay.
So, like, mm.
It seems like the thread throughout your early life and even now is sort of fighting for the underdog, whether that was for policy, whether that was the type of company. I mean, does that resonate?
I mean, I certainly am very interested in. Uh, I don't think that that's where the source of it. Like, I certainly am interested in politics. I'm idealistic. I have an idealistic bent, and that's also visible in SafetyWing. Like, literally, our top values aim for the ideal, which is, be idealistic. But if I were to say in short what the like core motivator is, it's not that. It's more like coming somewhere and just seeing everything done wrong, and then just like, you're all doing this wrong. Can
Right.
let me let me try to do it right. Um, and so that's more the core motivation. It's just like setting things right. It's not as much of an angle as fighting for the underdog would have. Although, of course, that will often be the output in a way, but that's not the core motivation.
So starting at 12 or 13, doing, hosted websites, and then later, you get your first job, but through school, where most people are whatever, playing sports, goofing off, did you stay pretty consistent from that time that you started doing website hosting? Were you engaged throughout school in I guess being kind of productive, creating things? Was that kind of a theme through then, or did you have more of a traditional goof off kind of
Yeah.
childhood?
I definitely had a goof off childhood as well.
Yeah.
I did both. I was 50-50, like internet world and real life. Although growing up, I would say the internet world was the more real one. But I I had two other projects, one in high school and one in college. And the high school one was an event company. And this I stumbled into because I hosted kind of like a party or as I'm like 15 or something, and it went super well. And then I was like, oh wow, I can do it. So it's like escalated up bigger and bigger, like big concerts eventually. The biggest one I had was like several thousand people concert kind of thing, event. Um, but yeah, also like painful industry. I also got a bit spooked away from it. Like everyone in associated with nightclubs, which is like an industry, like they're all criminals, like which
Sure.
is super. So it's like super dodgy. And it knows that events was, but we all the time interacted with them. Like they would own the venue space, or they would be like the guards that you have to hire. And it's just so many criminals in that space. So that's a kind of scary. So stop doing that. Um, and then I did one more kind of pre-re like before being real, which was in but also I learned a good lesson from the event company thing, but I can't remember what it was now. But the third one was just like recruiting company. So here I'm starting to become a bit more aware of what is happening in the world. And there's this EU expansion happening in 2000 and it happens in 2004. And that's when I noticed, now, and I have this friend from Romania, and this is like peak labor market. It's like very tight labor market. So uh, the idea was that you would have these engineers and others delivered to staffing companies to fill like unfilled roles. And that was a good idea. And we were able to get a customer. But then the kind of 2007 financial crisis happened.
Hmm.
And it took a while to get this up and running. So it's like really only in 2006 I started working on it. And so in 2007, this market disappears, which was also a great lesson from that, because then I learned that lesson that it's as hard to work on to build like an enduring startup than like a temporary one, but they go away. So you might as well solve these like fundamental problems. And yeah, so those were my three entrepreneurial ventures. It was also like at this age I got interested in policy, like around 1920, and politics, um and yeah, I think I had a good shot that it was like those two things, like policy and starting a startup, two ways to change, like positively impact the world. Um
It also
and
seemed like from a young age that you did not have limitations, certainly geographical limitations, maybe because you were attracted online so early, or leveraging that it doesn't seem like borders seemed like a uh, something that was really in your frame, right? That you could work anywhere, do anything, because it kind of seems like you were doing that. Like you said, I have a friend in Romania. I mean, you're in high
yeah,
school at the time.
right,
Most people
true.
don't have
Mhm.
friends in other countries where you're like
Right.
collaborating, doing a startup. Did that just kind of come natural from what you were interested in?
This is a good question I haven't much reflected on before. Part of it is maybe just growing up on the internet. But part of it might have been just my upbringing, my parents were like very adventurous, welcoming people, and we had people from other countries just like living at our house
Mm-hmm.
randomly for like different like period of someone from Cuba, period of someone from Romania. So we had like people from other countries living at our house at periods of time. Um, Not that they were like particular, it was more like kind of happenstance that it was like, oh yeah, they met this person and then something, 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 and now they're staying here for a bit. Like,
Right.
so
Yeah.
maybe there is something there.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the seed was planted that, yeah, you can. I mean, some people, and I think I love the analogy you used of kind of the modern day, lemonade stand, and so you were born at this time where, as a young child, the internet's exploding, late '90s. You're involved in that. You've got parents that, even if it wasn't like spoken, the environment is, hey, we interact with people from around the world. That's a normal thing to do. I mean, so what attracted you to getting into policy? And what was that like? And how long were you in that line of work?
Yeah. Here the like actual story is like a little bit embarrassing, but I'll just say it anyway.
We like embarrassing stories, so lay it on
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
It's weird. It's a weird story, but so when I was so my dad is kind of like a kind of center liberal person, but my mom is like a little bit of socialist. So she dragged the whole family on this like trip to Cuba for like it was just like this ultra communist thing to do, which is called like a workers' brigade something, where you like listen to propaganda about communism like literally hours a day, and then you like work in the field or like participate in building a school. And it's like I did that when I was 16 years old. Um, for like a whole summer.
Really?
Yeah.
So the idea around that is what? To put yourself in their shoes, to hear what they're
Uh,
hearing and do what
it's
they're doing?
it's solidarity is like solidarity with other communists, I
Yeah,
would say. But I came away from that like not being sold on communism. I was
sure.
more like, oh, I thought this was pretty good, but I was really I thought it was only about economics, like the story, but it's the problem with communism is it's totalitarian, which I really noticed when I was there. Like there's no like there's no independent judiciary. There's no like everyone says the same things. That's the most oppressive thing. Like you just hear the same stories in the newspapers at the university campuses from random people. Because it's so narrow. But anyway, so I was not a communist then anymore, which I previous before that would have been slightly appealed to. So I came back more of like libertarian leaning, liberal leaning person, and much more appreciative of things like rule of law,
Hmm.
which previously you kind of take for granted when you're just swimming in the waters. Um, and so anyway, that starts my interest in politics, really. That trip and coming back. And so I get interested in economics and understand that. So I end up studying that. Um,
Can I ask you, not to interrupt,
yeah,
but can I ask you, was it your mom's desire to embed the communism a little bit into you, and did you?
probably.
Yeah, and then the result was almost, I wouldn't say the complete opposite, but kind
Yeah,
of, where you're challenging it now, and now actually actively challenging it by working in policy that I'm
yeah,
guessing goes a little bit in the face of it. Did that create any kind of a
yeah.
rift between you and your mom?
No, because my parents are really tolerant people.
Sure,
So
sure.
no, that's been a problem at all.
Okay, cool.
Um, yeah, no, they I think really want us to, be our own people. And, I had definitely had a little bit of this, like, kind of what you can call free range upbringing. And not in a like a fake way like that many would like point out today, where it's like, oh yeah, super tolerant, like except if you disagree with us. No, like super tolerant also in that way.
Sure,
So
sure.
no, it's like a loving relationship that is not dependent on having any particular opinion, I think.
So tell me about the work that you did there.
But to their credit, I should
Yeah,
say, I should add to their credit.
sure.
Um, I think she even mentioned it at some point, like to her own credit. Like, uh, what was the thing you said? What is the work I did?
Yeah, yeah. So as you're getting more into policy, politics, what are you focused on? What is the work that you do, and how long were you doing
Yeah.
that?
So I got an amazingly cool job from my perspective. So at this point, right, I've studied economics. I'm interested in politics, but not like people who are in politics. One thing that it's a bit hard to say from the outside is that there's two sides to politics. One is winning elections, which can be fun enough. It has its own charm. Like campaigning is very actually one of the more similar things I've done to startups. But that's a particular kind of battle game. And then it is like running a country and like making wise rules and choices. See, that's a completely different thing. It has nothing to do with the other thing. One analogy I learned as I went into startups is it's very much like product and sales,
Hmm.
actually. It's running the country, that's product. Getting elected, that's sales.
Hmm.
And Actually, another thing I noticed when I was there is there's not a lot of product people left in politics. It's like there's almost all salespeople.
That's such a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah, I even think of product almost as like operations, right? The
yeah,
getting in and getting it
operations,
done, right?
getting it done.
And you're right. I mean, the goal now is sales. Like, get elected.
Exactly,
We'll figure the rest out later, or we won't. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
No, so my job was it's an innovation. They were lending an American concept, which is this thing about policy advisors, and the idea was someone who makes writes out policy at the parliament. And I was working with the current government, but also the parliamentarians, mostly like certain ones. And so what my job was like they would have like gone won the election and like they had a program and like one of the lines said something like incredibly vague, like reform higher education. And then they're like, can you fill this with some content?
Right.
Reform the police. Very like vague statements. And then I would run these like 6 months programs, which was incredibly rewarding because it was so autonomous, the job. And um, where I would gather research, typically hold like a conference with like academics and other specialists, talk to users literally in one of them. There would be like put down this like commission and then and make drafts. And many of those became like law and stuff in some areas, and I cycled through several. But then, of course, I got to know some areas really well. So, like things like health and the social safety net were things I had projects on. So, therefore, I know like a ton about it, also comparatively. Because, oh yeah, another thing I did was whenever I looked at something, I looked at what all the other countries were doing. So I have like bizarro amount of knowledge, like on some of these narrow subjects.
It's really interesting how they all feed together, going back to this upbringing, which was pretty inclusive. Again, borders didn't really mean that much. That leads into, I think, a natural curiosity of other cultures and stuff like that. That leads into, as you're getting into helping with policy, um, naturally gravitating towards, okay, well, if my brain's already geared to, I'm not limited to just what's happened in Norway, I can look at the whole world by comparison. Then I've got a lot of things I can benchmark, right? Which probably hadn't been done before. It seems very logical uh, in hindsight, right? But not a lot of people are doing that. It sounds like that role was you were to make good on the bullet points that the salesman used to get elected, right? It was sort of like, well, if
Yeah,
I get elected, I'm going to reform healthcare. And it's like,
right.
oh, shit, I guess we got to reform healthcare now.
Yeah,
Can someone
yeah,
do some
exactly.
research on that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
How
Can
long,
you?
how long did you stay in that, and what caused you to pivot out?
It was 2.5 years, I think it was. 2.5, 3 years. And what caused me to pivot out is I there were several things. And here also, I'm about to say something I don't think I've said publicly. I don't know how I got into such a personal tack, but I'm gonna run with it anyway. Uh, the Okay, so the first one is one that I've said a billion times, and it is definitely true. Part of the story is just the government is a big organization, and so it's like it's a bit annoying to be in for the same reason it's annoying to be in any big organizations. Like it's just so hard to make anything happen,
Right.
um, and um, and that's frustrating, right? When you're young and eager.
Sure.
Um, so that's a big part was just like a bit disillusioned with this speed, the potential to do anything worthwhile. And I did also, I should add, some of the things that I did advocate for and made no progress were among the problems that I then went into with online freelancing and the sort of rise of the internet, labor force and economy and things like that. Um, but then the second thing that I also found incredibly frustrating is there's this lack of authenticity in politics at the time. Maybe I don't know if it's changing, but I found that incredibly off-putting. And so like people just weren't real, even in closed meetings. So you would have like closed meetings where in theory everyone is like allies there. And I knew what some of the people, the one I knew socially or like would have a beer with, what they actually thought about, but they never said what they thought. They
Sure.
always like said what they, from my point of view, was like what they thought the outcome of the negotiation was going to be like. And then like maybe like 2% to their side or something, but not authenticity. So yeah, so that was another one that like really upset me.
Yeah, you
Uh,
seem like a guy that is wired to be like anti-bureaucrat, and it would probably be or anti kind of hierarchy for the sake of having hierarchy, layers
right,
of
definitely.
bullshit for the sake of having it. Oh, we've always done it this way. This is the
Yeah,
procedure. You're like, the answer's right here. We can implement it in the course of a few days, few weeks, whatever.
right.
Why are we stalling? Why are we delaying? And yeah, I could see that being really frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And why aren't you saying what you
What you
really
mean?
think,
Yeah, yeah.
what you mean? And so that was another kind of push part that I didn't like. And but also I should add, I was often like it was either this or startups, and the startup, was calling. It's a little bit more fun, adventurous. Politics is fun too, but in a different way. It's like so. Yeah, so eventually I decided to start. At this point, I heard about digital nomadism, and I thought that would be so cool to become a digital nomad. Um, and kind of planned it out, set the date. This day I was going to quit my job, going to started working on weekends on a startup idea. That became a real company, became Superside, and today has like 700 employees. But um, and yeah, and eventually made the plunge.
Did when you got out of Superside? Well, talk to me a little bit about Superside. How did you guys scale it so fast? Did you have investment capital going in? Did you just bootstrap it? Like, what did that look like? And then when you left, did you just sell out your portion? What did your exit look like from there?
When I left, no, I sold out some shares at like later on, not exactly when I left, but and I'm still shareholder, and I'm still is like very good friends and talk often with my co-founder Frederick, who still runs it. Um, yeah, we did have venture capital, so we went through Y Combinator, the accelerator, and we raised an angel round with some like incredible angels. Among them Sam Altman, actually, like the OpenAI founder.
Yep.
And we also later raised a big round, like something like akin to a Series B, like I think overall like $53 million raised.
How did you go from, sorry, not to interrupt, but how did you go from, you've got these kind of companies that you're doing in school, and they do okay and stuff, but your first real kind of, off the ground, adult startup, you're raising money from some like really big names in technology right now. How did you know how to do that? Was that your partner that brought that skill
Right.
set? I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah. No, I don't think my partner, no, so Frederick, no, he didn't know either. So no, okay, so here's how okay, so we want to start a company. In the beginning, it's like working on our weekends and nights, yeah. Uh, no, at first I just applied to some grant. I did actually know about Y Combinator. So I knew about Y Combinator because since I was a teenager, not teenager, but like for I think like 8, 10 years or something, I known about. I was reading Hacker News. I knew about Y Combinator. I had picked up on that back in those early days. I'd picked up on the sort of Silicon Valley thing, um, and like knew, oh, that's where I want to get to. So So I knew about that. So right when we started, I actually applied to Y Combinator, not thinking I would get in, just like to do it. We didn't get in then. It was the third time we got in. And then I applied some grants. So we got like one small grant, I think it's like 10, 15K, and then another one like 50K over the summer where we worked a lot because, during the kind of summer holiday. And then we got into Y Combinator in the autumn. And that's really when this all,
So
because
you
getting
guys
into Y
really,
Combinator.
you guys didn't have an inside track. You didn't know someone who knew
No.
someone. You just sort of went. Again, I think it goes back to. I think it's a really cool part of your personality where I don't know if you would call it fearless, but you're sort of like, well, it's out there and people are applying for it, so we might as well apply for it. And a lot of people, I think, just get stuck in going, their own limiting beliefs over what needs to happen, who you need to know, whatever. You guys just sort of went, well, it's there for the taking. We might as well apply. Like you've been following them for a long time. You've probably seen other startups that got into that. So yeah, I think that's really really cool. What caused you to? And I want to get into your current company now because I got a lot of questions around that. So what was the decision to leave that and then start the company that you have now? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So that's a few years in. We just a year in, so just like 6 months later from when this one we just said when we applied to Y Combinator that autumn and got in, and that really changed us. Then we become this startup track thereafter. VC funded startup track. Um, we I stumbled upon this idea that would became safe, or the need, the problem, both the idea and the problem at the same time. And this I was kind of uniquely settled to because me and my co-founder were like politics interested. And so we had a lot of conversations about that. And we knew the sort of broader impact of the sort of freelancer economy, which is how we, viewed the kind of industry we were in Norway. Um, so came across this issue with the freelancers that they kind of fell between the chairs of their social safety nets. And pretty immediately I had the idea. This is well, we're still at Y Combinator. I remember the conversation. We were actually at the Nordic dinner at the co-living house with the other Nordic YC founders, and I talked to some Danish founder there, Soren, who's became a very good friend, and Frederick. And this is like when I realized, oh, someone has to build a global social safety net. Like I couldn't sleep all night. It was so obvious, and it's such a huge idea. And it was just remarkably exciting to me. Um,
So you were just pulled towards it once the idea was there. It was like it was
yeah,
just tapping, like
yeah.
you had to do something with it.
And then, but obviously I couldn't because I had this other company.
Sure.
So I didn't start it then. I mean, we didn't launch till 2018. What I did instead was that I tried for over a year to get someone else to build this company. So I basically went around to friends who were aspiring founders, and I'm like, you know what you should do? Make a global social safety for internet workers. hmm
Yeah.
And no one wanted to do that. I was really close one time, but no one wanted to do it. So that was like a very big pull. Was just like someone got it. Someone has to do this because I saw the timing as it felt super bizarre and kind of futuristic and like maybe, but to most people, but to me it seems like overdue almost. And I think we were right. I mean, in the progress of SafetyWing, I would say we've been proven right. We're still early though on because it was really two parts. It was we need to make a global social safety net, and that will become the first country on the internet. That second part still feels early today.
Can you
Uh,
describe what do you mean? Like what was in your head? What composes the global social safety net? Like what are the core parts of that?
I mean, it's just health and income protection. Is roughly it. And what income protection is disability, unemployment, old age, parental leave.
Right.
Um,
All the things that a government would normally
yeah,
provide to a salaried or
right,
hourly worker. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So that, but globally available, and good, right? I also don't think they're particularly good, the government provided social safety nets. Norway is pretty good, but yeah, trust me, when you live in Norway, you don't, that's not what you associate with like a great user experience.
Sure.
Like, yeah.
So you guys
Uh,
have grown. You guys have 150 people now over like in 60 countries. So your own company is like the living model of like remote, and especially not just remote like we're in one or two other countries, but you guys are just all over the place dealing with probably every time zone in the world, I have to imagine.
yeah, totally. We're a fully remote, super international company. Um, and it's very inspiring. Yeah, we get to apply, that's the lovely thing about starting a company is you can really apply your own values and been able to make a company that is so incredibly authentic and autonomous. There's no working hours, it's fully remote, um, and very low management, but under certain conditions you can make that work, and it's an incredibly enjoyable, positive place to work. So I'm very excited about the company that we've built, and I think we're gonna make it. Like we're it took us a while. Like it just like we last year we got like former like insurance company license and stuff to make more products, and just the compliance things, it's unbelievable that like no wonder like we have like there are no other startups in this area. It's just so difficult. But now we're here. Now we're past that hurdle in many ways, and yeah, we're working on product that's going to take us a lot closer to that vision. Um,
And I got to think that experience, even though it was painful at times, working in the government, lended itself well to this part of your startup where it's like, okay, we've got to deal with regulatory compliance in Bangladesh. And it's like most people would just run for the hills, and you're like, there's probably a way to attack this. It might not be
yeah.
fun, not my favorite thing to do, but like you had that skill set, I think, coming in.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I knew no, like a lot of people they just have like government is just like one block,
Yeah.
like it's like a thing. But of course, when you've been on the inside, no, oh no, no, there are different parts.
Sure.
There's like these people over here. They're just trying to check their boxes and execute their thing, and then there's those people over there. They're, looking to be elected and whatever. And then there's people over here. They have responsibilities. So it's like, yeah, once you've been on the inside, you do learn a bit more about who's who, and I guess that makes it less scary. And you
Are,
also know a bit more about how to talk to them, I suppose.
I'm sure there are, but do you have numbers now on how many people are working remotely globally and what the projections might be like moving forward or any guesstimates around that?
Yeah. So I have two different numbers which we've seen. So there are different ways to count that includes higher or lower amounts of the independent ones. But okay, so by one count, before COVID, it was at like 3%, and now it's at 18%
Wow.
of the global workforce, which is a great acceleration, by the way, because that trend line would have just taken us to like 6, 7% by now, which means that this is actually the almost the only thing that didn't return to trend after COVID was remote work. Um, and I think that might be pretty accurate on it. It's higher in the US, but if you look at LinkedIn numbers, uh, it's interesting how people think that remote work is somehow receding because of there's been these headlines that have come from certain companies trying to return to work again and again and failing, but sort of every time getting headlines worldwide. But the reality is that the sort of post-COVID return was over in 2021, and since then it's been growing gradually up at the same pace as it did kind of pre-COVID gradually.
Yeah, I think the headlines were mainly the contradictions in large companies that made public proclamations of like, "Hey, this is what
Right.
we're doing. We're never going back." And then a year
Yeah,
later, share price is suffering or whatever, and they're
yeah,
thinking that's the problem, and and now doing complete 180s in the news, and it's the Amazons and the Googles and companies like that are getting the headlines, not the startups that are still accelerating into remote work.
yeah, totally. So, in our market and what you see on LinkedIn, in the overall, this is, just slowly growing. That's from a, significantly higher threshold. Um, and um, but if you look at the startup world, that's maybe more shocking to people. So the startup world, that was like if you look at job ads on Hacker News, that is a good startup metric. Um, that was 20% remote before the pandemic, and it shot up to 80, and that never went down. So if you want to just be like, what share of new jobs posted by startups are remote? 80%. And and that's just like where it's staying.
Yeah.
Um,
I expect it
so
with startups. We work with a lot of startups, and a startup saying they have an office that someone has to show up for, it would almost be like, what, why? I don't get it.
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there are of course exceptions for like if you do manufacturing or something
Right.
necessary, but yeah, if you work on your computer, that makes no sense.
Totally. We went into I own. It's funny. One of your first ventures was recruiting, because that's what we do. And so
Mm.
the idea was, I had tried and failed hiring remotely pre-COVID. Not because there was anything wrong with hiring remotely. I just didn't know how to do it. Didn't do enough research. Kind of did the Fiverr thing, which is sort of like picking your
Mhm.
husband or wife off Tinder. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like a lot of Fiverr
Right.
consultants just want to be Fiverr consultants, and they have their own little businesses. And so, um, and then I found a mentor kind of in COVID, and learned how to do it correctly, and then went into some other countries. And then my take was, what does it matter if I'm in New York, if someone's in Baltimore, or Cape Town? It doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is who they are and what they bring to the table. We're meeting on Zoom regardless, so
Yeah.
their physical location has no bearing. We might have to work some things out with time zones and things
Yeah.
like that to talk to U.S. clients, but we can do that, right? Especially when you look at some of these countries and look at the lack of opportunity sometimes, or the high unemployment rate for traditional type jobs. Um, yeah, it's a huge opportunity, I think, for both
Yeah.
sides. Where do you want to take it now? Do you have? Are you like, hey, we want to get 5 million people under our benefits plans, or like what does that look like for you?
Yeah. And step one is just to complete the product. So
Yeah.
to kind of get live with view one of the social safety net and the kind of internet, online citizenship product, because that's what it will ultimately be. Um, and still a few more years just to do that. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I do want to, was this to have a big impact, and that means to that, a large portion of the world joins. Um, so I want to stay at least long enough to that I know that it realizes the vision.
Yeah. And then you're an entrepreneur, so I'm guessing you've got other ideas, or will have other ideas, but that you'll lean into. But I love the mission. I love that you guys are, well, I want to say ahead of it in being sort of first to market, but like you said, I mean, there's already millions of people doing remote work, right? That need a social safety net. So, and it's going to grow. Like, you're already giving us stats that like it's growing like a hockey stick right now. And yeah, it's going to become something that if someone didn't do something, all of a sudden, from a public perception, it'll be like it's an outrage, right? Oh,
Mhm.
instead of a couple million people working that way, there's a billion people working that way,
Mhm.
right? And now we've got this social problem of these people don't
Yeah,
have health coverage or salary protection or anything else. So I think it's really cool what you guys are doing.
totally. Totally. And that is surprisingly the state of things. There are an online freelancing, there are by some numbers already hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Uh, so um, and yeah, if you're an online freelancer in most countries, that means you're a contractor for an employer, and a lot of the benefits and social protections aren't going to work for you. You're going to be sort of treated like a self-employed person.
When you guys build out because I know you've already got the health insurance part built out, I'm guessing you're working now on sort of the salary protection. Would that be sold to employers then in the form of similar to like insurance, like per employee, so that they get salaried benefits if they were to leave the job over a period of time? Would it work similar to I guess in the U.S., like unemployment insurance, workers' compensation, that kind of thing? Is that your vision for that part of the safety wing?
Uh, yeah, and that's coming very soon. But it's going to individuals first before it gets makes available to employers. And yeah, so that's going to have, the health, all the income protections, all of them actually, including the workers' comps, but also old age and disability and sick leave, etc. And also actually a visa package thing for nomad visas. So that will be quite substantial. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work out. But yeah, you'll hear more maybe next year.
Good. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. Thanks so much for being on. It's been really, really interesting getting to know you. And like I said, love the product, love what you guys are doing. And hopefully our paths will cross again soon.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed the conversation and yeah, appreciate the interesting questions and yeah, for going down memory lane there.
Thanks.